Alright, bro. Just returned from an absolute scrumptious chest day. Now, let's do some water. So, water is one of the topics in biology that's so important and so easy. Now, the people that are going to find this very important and useful are especially the ones that do A-level chemistry, because this comes up a lot. So, it's a great topic, very easy. Let's get on with it, bro. So here we've got our boy water, okay, H2O. And this is what our boy looks like, right? We've got one oxygen atom here, one hydrogen here, and another here. And of course they are all connected with a covalent bond, okay? So I'm going to already assume that you know what a covalent bond is, you know what oxygen is, what hydrogen is, and all this bollocks from obviously your GCSE chemistry, biology, whatever, okay? So I'm not going to delve too deep into that. If you do want to refresh on it, then, go ahead and skim through your GCSE book real quick. But ultimately, I'm just going to assume that you already know this. So, a very important property about our boy here is that it is polar. Now, what the fuck does polar mean, right? So, we have our covalent bonds here, and of course, each covalent bond has a shared pair of electrons, okay? You already know this. And you might think they are halfway in between each other, but there's actually no reason why they should be, okay? And in reality, it's actually closer to the oxygen than it is to the hydrogen. And because of this, because the electrons, the negative charge is closer to oxygen, the oxygen ends up being slightly negatively charged. And because the electrons have shifted away from the hydrogens, they are now lacking a negative charge. And so they are more slightly positive charge. And we denote this, we represent this by this Greek letter called delta, okay? Delta means slight, okay? So that means it's a slightly negative charge on oxygen and a slightly positive charge on hydrogen. And the reason why this happens is because oxygen is more electronegative than hydrogen. And what the fuck does this mean, okay? It is simply an inclination for an atom to attract a pair of electrons in a covalent bond. So oxygen is more electronegative because it has a higher proton charge than hydrogen. Therefore, it pulls the electrons more, it attracts the electrons more because of its higher proton densities, proton charge. Now, if you didn't understand a single bollocks I said, let me try and analogize this for you. Let me try and make it make sense for you a little bit more. So let's pretend that oxygen and hydrogen are both going to the gym, okay? And the electrons are like dumbbells, weights, okay? Now, oxygen is much stronger than our puny little pussy hydrogen, okay? Much stronger. Look at oxygen's meaty biceps and look at his friend hydrogen, okay? Pussy. Now, if he was to put a weight in between the two, who would lift it, okay? Who would lift it more, right? Who would be pulling stronger? It would obviously be oxygen, right? Much stronger. Look at the size of his triceps, right? They're almost as big as mine. Now, the size of his force, the size of his muscles, his attractive force is determined by his proton charge, okay? How strong he is. So, oxygen has a proton charge of 8 and hydrogen has a proton charge of only 1. What a pussy. And this is something you can see on the periodic table, okay? Again, I'm not going to go too far into GCSE chemistry, but you should have learned this. Oxygen has more protons, so it's stronger. And of course, oxygen is going to pull the dumbbell towards him because he's much stronger. Whereas hydrogen, he's too weak, he can't lift that shit. And so this is very similar to an electron, okay? Who's going to be pulling that electron much stronger, right? With much more force? It's obviously going to be the oxygen, right? And this makes sense because electron is a negatively charged fundamental particle, right? It's a negatively charged particle. And due to its due to oxygen's very high positive charge, where's the electron going to go, right? Again, negative and positive, they attract each other. Where is the electron going to go? Exactly like a magnet, the electron is going to be more attracted to the higher proton density, the higher positive charge in oxygen. Kind of like the Latina baddies, right? The hoes are going to like the attractive dude and not, the hydrogen. So that's how it works, right? Oxygen is more electronegative, right? Stronger. Therefore, it pulls the electron density towards itself, therefore creating a dipole, a difference in charge, a polarity. And this happens to many substances, many different molecules. And when this happens, we call it polar, okay? When there is a slight charge because one of the atoms is stronger than the other one. And so what you'll find, bro, is that if you put two water molecules together, they can attract each other because, again, they are both polar, okay? You put a polar molecule with another polar molecule, they attract each other. And this is very prevalent when it comes to water. You put one molecule of water next to another, and the slight negative charge on oxygen will attract the slight positive charge on another hydrogen of a neighboring water molecule. And when this happens, right, they create a bond with each other, right? And this bond is called a hydrogen bond. This is so important, so learn this. And this is what you see in water, okay? You put so many of these molecules together and they all form such a large network of hydrogen bonds. And due to this, due to their attraction to each other via these hydrogen bonds, they stick to each other and they are cohesive. That's what we call it. We call this cohesion when they stick to each other because they form bonds in between each molecules. We call that an intermolecular force. It's kind of like you're in the backseat of a car on a rainy day and you're like looking at the window and there's these like water droplets falling and you're like seeing which one will win in a race. I've done this many times. But that's the thing. These water droplets, the reason why they stick to each other like that is because of these hydrogen bonds. They form this little, almost like a bubble, if you will, right? They stick to each other and they're cohesive. And because water is cohesive and it sticks to itself, that makes it a very important property of water. And you gotta learn this, bro. Say, for example, a plant needs to take water from the roots, like all the way up to the leaves. And I know that's very boring, but imagine how it would do it. The water sticks to itself and therefore it moves up in like a column. Because if it didn't stick to itself, it would just break apart and fall off. But because it sticks to itself, it moves up in a column and it makes transporting water very easy. And because water can form these hydrogen bonds, these cohesive hydrogen bonds, they can form a surface which can resist external force. It can resist pressure. So you'll find that because of the cohesion on the surface, you can actually have little, insects, even though they're a bit more dense, they can float on the water because the cohesive molecules hold the surface together. So things like, mosquitoes, dragonflies, all that bollocks, even a paperclip, that's why it floats on water. That's because of its cohesive nature. And this is good because it acts as a habitat. Some insects actually live on the water, and that is something you need to learn, bro, because it acts as a big function for nature. And we call that surface tension. And no, that is not how Jesus walked on water. I don't know how the fuck he did that. Now, to get a little bit silly, a little bit goofy, a thing about water, and this isn't part of your spec or anything, but the thing about water is we actually find this in our lungs. And the reason why is to moisturize our airways, right? To help gases move nicely. So this actually links to World War One. So in World War One, they would use gas attacks, right? Soldiers would use gas attacks, chemical warfare, and one of the things they would use is chlorine gas, right? Concentrated chlorine gas. And the reason why this was so dangerous, bro, is that the chlorine gas would travel in the air and we'd breathe it in, and it would react with the water in our lungs to produce hydrochloric acid and chloric acid. So basically, it's quite a painful way to go, because you'd basically just be drowning in acid in your lungs. And the thing is, bro, chlorine gas is very easy to make. So yeah, bit of silliness there, me just faffing about. This video has gone on a bit too long, so subscribe to the video, like, all that bollocks. I'll see you in part 2, bro.